Welcome to the Confident Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Anne, mama of two, holistic pregnancy and pediatric sleep consultant, and the founder of Empowered Decisions. In our seasons together, I'm here to help you step into your inner confidence from pregnancy to motherhood. Whether you are preparing to meet your baby or integrating into new mom life, this is a safe space with education and support for your journey. Join me as we raise the vibe of our motherhood collective. Welcome back to the Confident Motherhood Podcast. I'm Anne, and today we are talking about breastfeeding, desiring a long-term journey. Now, today's episode is going to focus on sharing information with you so that you can be successful in your journey, no matter what that looks like for you, no matter how long that is, but giving you the information and the context and all of these things to increase your chances of achieving a long-term journey if that's what you desire. Now, there's going to be a lot of kind of weaving in my personal story today, and there's so much information to share that even as I was putting together this outline, it felt a little bit all over the place. But what I want you to know is no journey is the same. No journey is the same. It is deeply, deeply unique. And I also want to be really vulnerable with you today. I want to share with you where I struggled. I want to share with you the type of support that I feel like is necessary because we really need this information. It is not uncommon to hear a new mom, a nursing mom share that she wants to nurse as long as she can, or maybe have the goal of 6 months or a year and beyond. But rarely do we get the advice of actually how to achieve that. And that's what we're going to be diving into. So I'm going to inform you, I'm going to give you my recommendations, again, where support is needed, things that they don't tell you. We're just really going to dive in. And today's topic is inspired by a recent conversation I had with my sister. I was driving the other day. You know, those like raw, vulnerable, bestie sister talks. And I thought I need to do an episode about breastfeeding because there really is so much information to share. Now, if I kind of go back to when I was pregnant the first time around, I very clearly knew that I wanted to nurse, and I just kind of hoped that I was going to be able to do so like many women do. But man, do I remember pregnant women, or just moms kind of sharing their stories being like, oh, breastfeeding is so hard. And I always thought to myself, like, God, people are so negative. It turns out that they were right. Like breastfeeding actually is really hard, but just saying that is not helpful. Like so much context is missing when you tell a expecting mom that breastfeeding is hard. That is negative. Right? That is not helpful in any capacity. And it needs to come along with like what support is needed when you're going through breastfeeding journey challenges. And I'm like, that is the missing link for me. And that's where I feel like so many women need support. And it's not enough to just say that it's hard, even if that is factually true. So is breastfeeding natural? Our body's designed to do that? Yes, it is incredible. Does that make it easy? No, it's actually learned. And I want you to think about learned, that word, through the lens of you are learning, your body's going through an adjustment and changes and figuring out how to do this, but your baby is also learning too. So you guys are a team in this, and with any learning, there's a lot of trial and error, there's a learning curve, and amongst those challenges is where things can be hard. So disclaimer, I am not an IBCLC, which is an international board certified lactation consultant. I have personally and professionally worked with IBCLCs over the past 7 years, and I have a love for the care, the education, and the support that they provide. I am very much aligned with the mission that women need so much support postpartum overall, especially with having success with breastfeeding, and even more so when you desire for that to be a long-term journey. And again, long-term meaning like, let's say 6 months to a year or even beyond. It's not uncommon, and I've worked with, hundreds of women postpartum in a sleep capacity over the years. It's not uncommon to hear a nursing mom share that they hope to breastfeed long-term or breastfeed, like I hope to make it to a year. I had 2 long-term exclusive nursing journeys with both of my boys. My first son, I nursed him until he was about 14, 15 months. And my second was longer at 20 to 21 months. And I'll kind of be weaving in my personal experiences in both of those journeys because they were vastly different. And additionally, I also have the lens as a holistic sleep coach, this crucial and important connection of sleep and nutrition being all options, breast, bottle, breast milk, formula, and what that means alongside when you're trying to improve your baby's sleep. So I have the pleasure all the time of getting to share with moms that you do not have to choose between your nursing journey and a sleeping baby, but that's topic for another day. So like I mentioned, you're going to be hearing, I'm going to kind of pause here and there to weave in personal experiences, but it's really because of context and giving you real life examples, even real life stories of my own struggles, because I don't think that these struggles are talked about enough. Like I said, it's not as easy to just say it's hard. Knowing where somebody struggled and where they found support to get through it, that's where I feel the unlock is. Now, in my experience, there are women who have zero interest in nursing. To each their own, right? There are women who want to nurse, but are severely undersupported and undereducated, and then end up kind of bowing out early because it's not working or it's not sustainable. Then there's also women who really want to nurse, but they're struggling mentally, right? That mental health piece of it. And they then need to switch to bottle feeding and or formula. So breastfeeding in the journey is really as unique as our thumbprints. And it's like, for some reason, breastfeeding gets lumped into this idea that there's like one way and one journey, and this is how it works, which couldn't be more false. So let's kind of, before we start talking about support and education and what these things look like, let's just call out some of the common struggles, right? Like when somebody says, oh, breastfeeding is hard, why they might say that. One, there's changes that our breasts go through when milk comes in, right? There's changes to our nipples. We're talking size and color. There's sore nipples, right? We are adjusting to this new little baby who is latching onto us every couple hours and cluster feeding. So there's a physical adjustment that our body goes through. And of course, there's discomfort in that, a baby latching on and like what that looks like. Then there's things like engorgement and mastitis, right? Which are terribly uncomfortable. Like those, poor mamas who have had to go through mastitis. It's not easy. Then we're talking latch issues, or simply just learning to latch is an adjustment. Then there's pumping, if you're a pumping mom, because breastfeeding also isn't just exclusively on breast. And this conversation gets missed a lot. But adjusting to a pump, being hooked up to a machine and having to express milk and figuring out pumps and what that looks like for you, and even that learning process, just like baby being on breast, that can bring its own little, list of struggles and figuring things out. Like this list really goes on and on. We just committed our body, right? We just are giving our body to this experience in pregnancy and birth for 9-10 months. And now our body, again, in a nursing journey, especially if we want that journey to be long-term, is also kind of like not our own. So there can be hard things that we experience in that process. And this is just kind of a list to be like, hey, these are some of the topics, but all of these come along with support. Overall, we are under-supported. We are under-educated, and this is a major problem. Now, this is also going to tie back to the reality, specifically here in America, where a majority of women in the workforce have to return to work weeks, right? We're talking 6 weeks, 12 weeks, and having nursed both of my children long-term, it's simply not enough time. Like I luckily had 5 months postpartum the first time around. The second time around, I was working for myself and at home, so I didn't have to deal with that. But even having 5 months, it took me 4 to basically figure out my nursing journey. And even then, it was still kind of ever changing. So we're also just not really set up for success. When we look at like World Health Organizations, like the recommendation of nursing 6 months or even beyond, that's all great. And majority of women would love to nurse long time. But when we look at the reality of the workplace and our maternal care, like those things do not align. And that creates additional struggle. And it kind of hinders our success rate of moms being able to nurse in a long-term capacity because of how the system is set up, which is really challenging. Now, kind of going back to this idea that like, oh, there's so much negative talk around nursing. And it's true, like in that entire list, with the exception of mastitis, I did not experience mastitis either time. There is an unusual, incredible magic in the experience of breastfeeding. Like it's kind of wild. It's kind of wild to go through that list of not so easy things and at the same time be in love with the experience. And not all women experience that. Like it's to each their own. But I was deeply in love with the experience of breastfeeding both times, even though the first time around was really hard and the second time around was really easy. But it is crazy. And I think that the magic of that experience is what kept me going. Like I genuinely loved it, but I think that I loved it the most because I had the support. And support in some cases is a privilege and it's a luxury. And I want to kind of talk about those options as well. So let's kind of rattle through this little list not in perfect order, but what my brain put together is there, like I mentioned, it's deeply unique. So there's not one journey like another. And there's so many factors that are involved when it comes to mom and baby. I want you to get whether you're pregnant now or your baby's newly here and you're tuning in because you're nursing and you want to nurse long term. And even if long term for you is 3 months, whatever it is, like I want you to get clear on your why. Why? Why do you want to nurse your baby? What is it for you? And I want you to ask yourself that, because this is like, I have to really feel this in my heart. And I experienced this the first time around. You have to ask yourself, is my self-worth attached to this decision of breastfeeding? Because if you desire and you really want to nurse your baby for whatever your reason is, and that is not possible, and that changes for you, it is going to commonly, it will create feelings of disappointment, feel like a failure, feel like you're not good enough, you're a bad mom, whatever the case may be. Like there could be a list of things that kind of come if what you're desiring and what your nursing reality, if that changes for you. And asking yourself these questions of what is my why and is my self-worth attached to this decision could really save you a ton of heartache and like the mental struggle that can come around with those changes. And I think getting clear on your why anytime you're committing to something is really important, because your why is also something that will keep you aligned with continuing to be educated and supported along the way so that you can achieve a long-term goal. I will never forget crying on the couch with my newborn who was very much struggling to latch and just I was saying it out loud, like, I just want to feed my baby. Like as a mom, you think about that, right? Like this should be natural. Shouldn't I be able to feed my baby? And I remember struggling on the couch thinking like, I'm a failure. Why can't I do this? Why can't I figure this out? Why isn't it working? And I had lactation support. And because of her, I was able to figure things out and have a long-term journey. But those moments can really rock you to your core. And I had to be really clear on what my why was and trust that I was going to be able to figure it out and me and my baby would be able to continue on with that journey. I also think that it's important. I mean, I'm somebody who very much focuses on like eye on the prize, focus on those things, but I think that it's important to have a backup. In both of my pregnancies, I had bought formula kind of just in case. And even though I had done it the first time around, I still felt the same going into my second. Like, I need to have formula on deck. Like, what if, things happen, you never know. And I think that that's really important. And I also don't want you to think about that as some sort of failure if you do end up having some sort of backup or you do end up using formula. But I think knowing that you have it also alleviates some pressure in certain like aspects of nursing. Now let's go back to the topic of an IBCLC, again, an international board certified lactation consultant. You need support. You need a resource. You need somebody in your corner. Now, whether you have access to free lactation support or it is somebody that you hire, I really feel that every mom who's on a nursing journey needs to have lactation education and support. Even though my journeys were vastly different, I would not have been successful. I would not have made it. I would not have made it through either of those journeys without having the support of an IBCLC. Like, I have so much respect for women in that field because what they're doing is truly incredible. So please, please seek out. And I've worked with so many moms over the years that have expressed that they had free access and they had free resources. And like, we are definitely in an age of like information overload, but please, please, please resource lactation education, whether you're pregnant or your baby's here now, because the support, since nursing is such a unique journey, it's really important that you have that support. So if you have access to work one-on-one with an IBCLC, highly, I can't say highly enough, highly recommend. I, with my first son, intensely used lactation support for the first like 0 to 4 months. Then about every 1 to 2 months throughout my first year nursing, I would kind of come back to needing that support as like new things were coming up for me. And around 8 months, I had been back to work since I was at 5 months postpartum, but I saw a dip in my supply. I kind of went into panic mode and I had another session with her. So I think that there's this misconception that like lactation support is only in the beginning. It's only like when you're learning to latch, it's only in the newborn phase, but you can really use lactation support, especially if you're planning for a long-term journey, because it's not one thing. Like, there's things that you may experience down the line that you didn't experience early on. And so just kind of think about seeking support as also potentially a long-term support for you in that journey. So here is a list of things. I'm going to say, I believe it's 8 if I can count. Here are 8 reasons why I was able to nurse for 1 year and beyond, because it was not by chance. It was not by chance that I just got lucky to nurse my baby for beyond a year. So number 1, my amazing doula recommended an IBCLC. Shout out to Farrell. And she recommended her when I was pregnant. So I actually did a pre-baby call with her to set expectations, which I really loved because it allowed my first few weeks to have so much more clarity and less stress. And here's some examples, like understanding that the initial milk that comes in is actually called colostrum. And note, fun fact, our milk is not on some Amazon Prime status. It's more like postal service, like it's on some 3 to 5 business days vibe. So the initial milk that comes in, which feels like nothing, like our brain, it's hard to wrap around, like, is my baby even getting enough? Yes, it's exactly what they need. It's called colostrum. And then within like a few 5 days, then our actual milk comes in. And that's when, like, we can go from normal breast size to like, whoa, what is happening? But even just knowing that that was going to happen. Hey, when you're in the hospital, or when you newly have your baby, this is what's happening. And then your milk is going to come in. And here's some of the changes that you can experience. Like that, just having some expectation really put me at ease. So when it was happening, it wasn't new information to me. And I was also able to connect with her and have that support. This next one is really high on my list. I did craniosacral therapy for my son. And you might be thinking, what? Craniosacral therapy. Now, this essentially, and I'm going to pause when I say this, is essentially going to a baby chiropractor. But this is not the bone cracking that we think of. This looks like essentially if you were to see somebody putting like very gentle pressure points on the body on your baby. That's what it looks like. Now, my son was tongue tied and it was missed, but my lactation consultant caught it and we went on a journey. But once his multiple frenulums were released, combined with craniosacral therapy, did he then learn to latch? I was then no longer in pain and we were on our way. I actually continued. I actually think that craniosacral therapy should be routine for babies post-birth, like a normal part of support. Unfortunately, it is not, because it really changed the trajectory of my nursing journey when we could work on those facial muscles, like when we could release the tension in his neck, like all of the things. It was a complete game changer. Like I continued taking him up until his first year. My second son was born. I did the same thing with him, but it can be a major support for you on your breastfeeding journey, regardless if you're planning to nurse short-term or long-term. So craniosacral therapy, definitely something to explore. I'm also happy to do an episode on that. If anybody, you can drop me some messages on socials if you're like, yes, please talk about this more, because I have lots to talk about when it comes to craniosacral. Then the other game changer for me is I had a tough sleep journey with him, which is why I'm a sleep coach in the first place. But 0 to 4 months, human pacifier, co-sleeping, constant sleep struggles, all the sleep drama. And I knew that I was going back to work at 5 months. And I kept thinking to myself, how the hell am I going to go back to work? I don't even have a milk supply, because he needed to be latched on me, whether milk was coming out, in order to sleep. So I never had the separation from him in order to pump, in order to stash it so that I could take him to daycare. So sleep coaching him, holistically sleep coaching him at 4 months was another game changer for me. Once he was sleeping, I could wake up, I could pump, I could store it like that. I had basically had 1 month to get ready so that I could drop him off at daycare and be like, okay, here's milk, right? Like now I can go back to work and have that confidence. And I wouldn't have been able to do that had he not been sleeping. And this is actually a really common struggle, because it's really common for babies to have a feed sleep association, especially breastfed babies, because they're nursing for so many natural but reasons that can make sleep a struggle when they're needing that to fall asleep and not having any of that separation. So I had no clue, a little bit of story time. I had no clue as a first-time mom how much he ate per feed because he was exclusively on breast. Now, I could tell you that he ate on both breasts. I could tell you how many minutes he ate for, but I also never weighed him. I didn't put him on the scale before a feed and after a feed to be like, oh, I wonder how many ounces he's eating. So I dropped this sweet boy off at daycare, in that first day to a week with a stash. And I was like, here you go. I'm not sure how much he eats in a session because he's been exclusively breastfed. And in 1 week, my month stash was gone. I was devastated. The tears that I teared in that day that I realized that there was no milk. So basically what that meant for me is from that day on, every day, what I pumped in that day, he consumed the next day. Now, were there some times here and there where I was able to get a little bit ahead? Sure, but not by much. And that was my experience for the rest of that year and beyond. So from 5 months to 12 months and beyond, every day I basically had this like pressure of like, hey, whatever I pump today, that's what he is going to be eating tomorrow, which is not a very settling feeling. So basically I would say every day, every week, every month, I kind of questioned, am I going to get to a year? Like, am I even going to make it? Obviously I made it and I went beyond, but I got to be honest, like there were so many moments in that first year that I wasn't sure that I was going to make it. I didn't think that the goal that I had was actually going to be a reality for me. I just did all that I could to maintain. Like I did all that I could within the resources and the education and the information that I was learning to trust in the process. And I'm going to share this advice with you too. You got to give yourself grace. Like it's so much easier now after going through the journeys to reflect back and be like, oh, I could have given myself more grace, but it is not a destination, mama. It's a journey, and you're going to have to give yourself grace and have patience with yourself in that process, because the more pressure and stress that we put on ourselves in that journey, it's not conducive to milk production. It's not conducive to that experience. So just give yourself some grace. Okay, continuing on with the list. I hydrated. I religiously drank 100 ounces of water a day. Like I did not miss. I had my, you have whatever tumbler you're using and you know how many ounces in it. I knew exactly how many times I had to fill that up. Going back to work, you're in a rhythm of a work routine. But even if you're at home, like make sure that you're hydrated. Breast milk's something like 80% water. And there's so many factors that are involved in the body's production of milk. But if you are not hydrating, and the next on the list is nourishment, mama, you got to eat. And you also want to make sure that you're eating nourishing meals. And that's a really important part. So I think hydration and nourishment are really important. And if you see a mom who's on a nursing journey, like, did you eat today? Did you drink your water today? Like, are you super stressed out today? That is not going to help your body on your nursing journey. So as simple and almost like silly as it sounds, like, hey, you got to eat and you got to drink, these are two big things that are often missed. So really important. Next, and kind of aligned with this conversation, is your stress management. I truthfully was not as great at this, but I was aware. I was aware that I was in a demanding job. There was definitely stresses involved. And I was also aware that I was adjusting into being a mom for the first time, right? In that first year of your baby's life. And you're navigating all these things, whether it's a nursing journey, I was going back to work. When am I pumping? What does he need for daycare? I got to pick him up. I got to get home. Like there's all the things that come along with whatever your first year of life looks like as a mom. And there is stress that's involved in that. So now I know, right? Like mindfulness practices and ways to be aware of and manage my stress, whether that's deep breathing, whether that's meditation, whether that's journaling, like the list can go on, but make sure that you are aware and you're managing your stress as best you possibly can. It's not easy to be a mom. Like mom life is hard, whether you're nursing or you're not nursing. But again, if we're looking at a long-term journey, you can't be stressed out the entire time. Like it's not conducive. So we do have to find ways to manage our stress. Then I would say supplementation can play a role. And this kind of came and went. I didn't do supplementation the entire time, but there are supplements that can be helpful in a nursing journey. And I'm intentionally leaving out specific supplements because I want to make sure that this is a conversation that you have with your provider, with your lactation consultant to meet your needs and what you are experiencing. But I do want to add that to the list, that supplementation, herbs, etc., can be really helpful alongside a nursing journey if that's the right fit for you. And then this, as we kind of continue on with this list and wrapping up with this specific part of our chat, is when you have, because look, I don't want to project onto your experience, but you may encounter people who don't understand your journey. And this goes back to having a clear why. There were many times when I was going through struggles where I would hear from, people, let's say, on like, why are you doing this to yourself? Like there's formula. Like, why are you choosing this hard path? I was very clear on my why, and I was very clear and I trusted in the support that I had, that they were going to help me get to as long as my journey was going to be. But when you're attached, right? Your self-worth is attached to this journey. You're faced with resistance. You're faced with people who are not understanding your journey. That can really rock you. That can really make you question your decision making, be like, am I doing the right thing? And sometimes we have those loved ones and people in our life that can kind of plant those seeds for you to assess, for you to go within and be like, is this aligned for me? Right? Because sometimes we can get so attached to our goal that we fail to realize and fail to ask ourselves, is this aligned for me anymore? Like, is this what I want? Is this working? Is this good for me as a mom? Is this good for my baby? Obviously, we know that there is a long list of amazing benefits for breast milk for babies, but it's a bigger conversation than that. So just, again, I don't want to project, but I just want you to know that you could face that. And this goes back to making sure that you're making self-aligned decisions and you're being in tune. Now, this is random, but aligned. As a sleep coach, there is way too much pressure on ounce consumption. Now, whether you are bottle feeding your baby and you know exactly how many ounces that they're getting and that's creating stress, or you're a nursing parent and you don't know, like I was, right? You don't know how many ounces that you're consuming and it's creating the stress of like, are they getting enough? I just want you to know that it's very normal to question, like, am I feeding my baby enough? Are they getting enough? Am I meeting their needs? And when your body specifically is producing what your baby is consuming, you are attached to that. It is a part of you. I unfortunately think that because I've seen this a lot over the years, where you'll kind of get that question at a pediatrician checkup, like, oh, how much are they consuming? Or what does that look like? And unfortunately, I've worked with many moms post a pediatrician visit that are really feeling down in the dumps, that are really like, oh, I don't know if I'm making enough, right? And if sleep struggles are attached to that, that's another conversation. But I just want you to know that I think that there needs to be an alleviation of that pressure when it comes to ounce consumption. And we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Is your baby gaining, right? Do we have wet diapers? Do we have poopy diapers? Like, do we have these things? Like, there is a more holistic conversation versus just ounces. Like, I just think it's some unnecessary stress. Do we want to make sure that babies are growing and gaining and thriving? 1000%. I just don't think it's as specific as just looking at ounce consumption, because there is pressure on both sides. And look, nursing the first time around for me was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It's one of the hardest things I've actually ever even committed to in my life. Because when you're pregnant, you're pregnant. Yes, it's a choice in some capacity, but it's just happening. You're going along for the ride, whether you're like in it or not. Nursing was a choice, right? It was a choice to do that. It was a commitment. And additionally hard, I felt like through the layer also of like, in that experience, I had to go back to work. I had to not adjust to not being with him during the day, which also has an effect on your nursing journey, because now you're pumping, you're attached to a machine. And I remember having a conversation with my lactation consultant. I think it was right around that 8-month mark when I went into panic mode and my breast milk, supply was dropping. And she said something along the lines of like, we love the idea of being able to have it all, right? To be pregnant and have our baby and go back to work and have the career and have the mom life. But when it comes to things like a nursing journey, sometimes we don't get to have it all. Like, we're meant to be with our babies, right? There is a biological, physiological piece of nursing and then being latched on us and how that process works. And it can be more challenging when you're away and you're stuck on a pump and these things. And on the flip side of that, it's a blessing. It's a blessing that we have access to pumps and we are able. I would not have had a year plus journey with him going back to work if I didn't have the resources of having a pump. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many sides to that conversation, but I was facing some of the realities of not being with him. And as much as that journey was one of the hardest things I've ever done, it was a journey and an experience that I wouldn't trade for anything. Like, now, of course, years down the line, there's so much more that I know now that, I wish I knew then, which is why we're chatting today. But I really felt so blessed along the way to be able to experience that journey, which is why it's like, if that's what you desire, then you deserve to have the support and information and tips and guidance and, to be able to have like a vulnerable conversation so that you can take what resonates and leave what doesn't and do your research and educate yourself, make sure that you're supported so that you can have the journey ideally that you are looking for. Now, I'm also happy to share that my second journey was much easier. It was much easier, but I still utilized lactation support in the first 12 weeks. Like, I still had a lactation consultant. I didn't do in-home with her, like I did the first time around, I desperately needed in-home support and really having her help me, since he was tongue-tied also, but having her help me latch and figure out different nursing positions. But the second time around, I knew those things. I knew the variety of positions, and, I knew that I wanted to have him check to see if there was any latch issues, and he didn't. He didn't have that. But second time around, I think oftentimes can be a bit easier. And look, my sister, she nursed all three of her boys, and she didn't have the struggles that I had. It was more of just an easy and natural process. So I think sometimes comparison can be really hard. It can be hard when you have, people in your life and you're like, your journey looks different than theirs. So again, this kind of goes back to the conversation of give yourself some grace. I also know very clearly that my second time around was a lot easier because I didn't have to go back to work. I was in business for myself for that point. I worked for home. And I think that played a really large role in me being able to nurse him until 21 months because I didn't have that separation. I didn't have to be attached to the pump. I pumped here and there when I needed to be away from him for a little period of time. But I very clearly know why one journey was more complicated and why the other was a lot easier. We're going to wrap up today, Mama, with I want you to know, and I'm sure you're grasping this at this point, that breastfeeding is a journey. It is not a destination. It is a marathon. It is not a sprint. It is deeply unique. So going back to talking about comparison, be careful with comparison, the thoughts of failing, because your mental health is a priority. It is a priority for you. It is a priority for your baby. And you really have to go within the entire time to assess how you're doing and how you're feeling, what's working, what isn't, what support do you need, where do you have questions? You have to take it baby step by baby step. Overall, we know that there are sometimes unforeseen circumstances, but that would prevent you from nursing, right? But overall, you can do it. But I don't think that it's something that you should do alone. I don't think it's something that you can do without educating yourself, without the support. Because when we take that route, which majority of the time it's just because we don't know, right? Know better, do better. And my hope is spreading awareness and kind of having these conversations early on, especially if you're pregnant, so that you can head in more empowered into your journey. I used to think, honestly, that you don't really need to do too much lactation prep until your baby's here because I saw firsthand how unique, okay, he's got tongue tie, it's the latch issues, it's this, I need to solve for this. And I'm you don't really know that until your baby's here. But I do feel that having breastfeeding support and lactation expectations before birth can be largely helpful. So I hope that this episode was insightful and informative and it supports you. And even as I was putting this together, I'm God, I hope I don't miss things. And I'm sure that I did miss things, but I don't think that this has to be the end. I think this can be the beginning in season 1 here as we're talking about breastfeeding, that this is an evolution. And I also desire, and I'm going to bring to life, that in season 2, I'm going to do an interview style podcast episode with a lactation consultant and really be able to dive into different conversations to continue to support you. So I kind of think about this as part 1. We are opening up the conversation, but I want you to know that I'm rooting for you and I'm proud of you no matter what your journey ends up looking like. And I want you to be proud of you no matter if you nurse for 1 day or you nurse for 1 year. You're doing amazing and you are exactly where you need to be. And there really are people and women here in the postpartum support world, even prenatal support world, that are here for you. So utilize your resources no matter what that looks like for you. And thank you so much for tuning in. And until the next episode, lots of love. Whether you're a tired mom struggling with your little one's sleep or an expecting mom looking for empowerment and advocacy as you prepare for birth, I'm here to show up for you with proven strategies and education to elevate your journey. You deserve to feel heard and given the tools to have success. Mama, you do not have to navigate your pregnancy or sleep struggles alone. Head over to empoweredwithann.com to discover how we can support you. Confidence, empowerment, and peace are just a click away.